Good afternoon. Welcome to Big Vision TV. It's Melanie Moore here, and today I am joined by Dale Pinnock. You can see him here, also known as the Medicinal Chef. Now, a lot of you would have heard me talk about the 4 pillars of your big vision, which for me are abundance and money and the amount of money you earn, the pillar of health, the pillar of relationships, and also the pillar of your environment. Now, today's guest is, well, the title, The Medicinal Chef, may have given it away. Dale is an author. He's published 15, 2 are on the way, books, and he's also a TV presenter and all round very clever human being. So without further ado, Dale, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. How do you normally describe yourself when people ask you, what do you do? That question.
Because my career's got so many different facets to it, it's instead of just reeling out a long list, I just say, well, I'm a nutritionist and a chef, but I write books about it and talk about it on telly and do courses about it and that kind of stuff. That's the quick version, because otherwise you just sound like you're blowing your own trumpet too much.
And when was the Medicinal Chef born? How did he come about?
I was at uni when I was actually doing my second undergrad, because I did 2 undergrads and a master's, and on my second undergrad, which was herbal medicine, that's where the leap was, that a lot of these kind of active constituents that are in medicinal plants, these things that make them medicinal, the pharmacological ingredients, so to speak, are also present in culinary plants, and that's where you get some of these health benefits that are associated with certain foods. And I started to see that crossover. I started to see where these 2 worlds lay, and the name just came to me when I was in clinic one day, and I was just like, right, I'm trademarking that bad boy, and there we go.
Fantastic. And yeah, I completely agree. So I titled this broadcast with the quote by Hippocrates, which I think most people have heard of it: "Let food be thy medicine." And because obviously food is fuel, but we can make better choices for our health than perhaps other food choices.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the name, the Medicinal Chef. It's actually deliberately quite provocative, because I want people to think of food as being beyond just fuel. It goes further than purely giving you the energy to function, repairing tissues, that kind of stuff. It's more than just proteins, fats and carbs. There's so much more going on.
Yeah.
It has the capacity to influence disease and long-term health, both positively and negatively, depending on the choices that you make and the things that you do repetitively. So It really is a very, very important and very profound part of our own self-care, and an important part of the healthcare picture on a larger scale as well.
Yeah, and also please do go follow Dale on Instagram. It's titled The Medicinal Chef. Now, I was having a look through there earlier, and the food looks great. When you kind of think about healthy eating, and in a minute I'd love to talk some about kind of the different diets around. It very often people kind of think, oh, it's boring. Sorry, I've got Bitsy on my lap here in case you're wondering what that white fluff is. Healthy food can have a bit of a bad rep, but looking at your Instagram account, looking at your website and your recipes, they're anything but.
I know. Well, you know what? I think because I always knew that nutrition was going to become a huge thing. I always knew that it was going to become very, very mainstream, and that people would finally get switched on to the fact that what they eat made a difference. But I never in a million years expected it to become weirdly entwined with fashion in the way that it has, and also to become like this aspirational thing. In what parallel universe is kale aspirational? But it's happened. You go through Instagram and there's just like 1,000,001 pictures of green drinks, yoga pants, and some avocado on toast, and people think,
I was just about to say avocado.
It's all about. It's not all about biodynamic grass-fed unicorn and wonga wonga berries and all this kind of daft stuff. It's just about getting back to basics, getting back to good wholesome food, the kind of food that our grandparents would have recognised, the kind of food that those generations would have been eating, our kind of meat and veg. It's not difficult. It really is. It doesn't have to be complicated, but because it's become so entwined in fashion and become so entwined in industry, and there's commercial interests around every single corner, it's very difficult to kind of extrapolate what's valuable information and what's basically just fluff and magazine filler.
And there is so much, I think conflicting information, there's confusing information, probably quite dangerous information out there as well.
Oh, yes.
And, I'm very, I love to work on my health and my fitness and I like to think that I make good choices when it comes to food. I have the occasional, hiccup every so often. I'm sure we all do.
Downstairs at the minute there is a box of mince pies, there's a box of chocolates. I'm dipping into them now and again and loving every second of it. Is it going to make me drop down dead? No.
Absolutely, and that's what I always say. If you're going to eat something that isn't probably the best food choice, at least enjoy it, Yeah, no point feeling guilty about things. But, perhaps maybe not choose to make them your primary go-to foods.
If you takeaways 4 nights of the week, then you've probably got the balance skewed against you a little, just a little bit of adjustment.
Okay, so before we talk about some of the diets that are around at the moment, I'd love to get a bit more kind of clarity on those. I'd love to let's just rewind back in time a bit more. Because so Dale and I met at an event a few weeks ago, and I asked Dale this question. So what was your background story? How did you get into this? And I found it really fascinating. So it started when you were a child, about 11 years old, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's where the seed was planted, I guess. It was that time of leaving primary school to go up to secondary school, that time in your life when you become acutely aware of yourself in relation to your peers. I started breaking out. I mean, I had the gift of kind of, started developing quite young, so that when I was at the tail end of junior school, I was massive, I was bigger than everyone else, and the first year of secondary school I was picked for rugby teams and stuff like that. Then I kind of stopped growing and everyone carried on as we went through primary school. But with that came the breakouts, and they were breakouts from hell. I looked like I'd been shot in the face with a blunderbuss. It really wasn't pretty at all. But I went to so many different specialists. I had so many doctor's appointments. I had all the oral antibiotics, the topical antibiotics, weird lotions and potions, and nothing particularly made that much of a difference. Then got to about 15 years old. I was sat around at my friend's house one night, feeling sorry for myself, moping about the state of my skin. And his mum lent me a book, and she said to me, "Look, unless you sort out what's going on the inside, nothing will change on the outside." Took this book, read it cover to cover, and I've probably still got it in here actually. I mean, it would be very, very dog-eared, but it's still in here, I'm sure. And I read this thing cover to cover, and that was that light bulb moment that we aren't passive in this process. We can actively engage in our own healthcare from one level or another. It's not that you eat a salad and you're cured of leprosy. It's not about that, but you can make choices every single day that can support your short and long-term health. And that was it. I became obsessed. I easily read over 1,000 books within an 18-month period. I used myself as a guinea pig. I tried every diet you could imagine, literally from a raw food diet to a macrobiotic diet to Ayurvedic diets to a vegan diet to paleo diets. I've done them all, not because I was necessarily searching for the one, because I don't necessarily think that there is, but it was more a case of I wanted to know the intricacies of every single one, inside, outside, upside down, left to right. I wanted to understand all the dynamics of it, so that when I'm communicating to people, so when I'm having conversations with people, I can actually talk about it from an experiential point of view as well as a theoretical. And then, that was it. That it completely captured my imagination. I mean, I was never really a great student, particularly, not because of capability, just because of boredom. I found school completely banal. I found it a waste of time. I grew up in the rave scene. I was more interested in listening to tunes and bouncing around in a darkened room with a glow stick, and because nothing really captured my imagination. I was more than capable. I was always capable of doing the work at school. I just found it boring. Nothing really animated me. But as soon as I found this thing, as soon as I found the thing that really, really got my imagination and really brought this passion to life. I do have quite an obsessive personality, so that was it. I went in, and then ended up going to uni, did my first degree in human nutrition, second degree in herbal medicine, postgraduate degree in nutritional medicine from Surrey, and here we are.
Yeah, I love it. It's amazing. And again, thinking about my own life, I've dabbled in lots of kind of different diets. Atkins, I did, low carb, and that was when I ate meat. So it's just like, oh God, meat and cheese. There's only so much meat and cheese you can eat. So I did that.
It's nice at first. At first you're like, whoa, I can do this and I'm allowed.
I know. So that was kind of the first thing I dabbled in. And then there's there's keto, there's paleo, there's and actually Inga's made an interesting comment here that celery juice is now kind of and I'm sorry, I've not done
Jesus
celery juice.
How else this happened? I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried celery juice, but it's bloody awful. It really is terrible. I
know. I felt like a bit of an outcast at one point. I thought, am I the only person not doing this celery juice diet? I'm sorry, but for me, it's not the most appealing way to start the day.
Where did it come from as well? It's come from someone with no nutritional qualifications whatsoever.
Oh, interesting. Ooh, okay.
They're getting their information from the other side. Sorry, doesn't cut it with me. I'm not Mystic Meg. Show me some science. Show me some double-blind, randomised, placebo-controlled trials. Show me some population data with a cohort of 100,000 plus. Then I'll talk about it. Because some geezer said that he got a message at some point, and that's going to cure the nation. Come on, Instagram. You've got a lot to answer for. Let's talk about celery juice. It's okay, there's some electrolytes in there. It's better than having a can of Coke. There's no getting away from that. There's electrolytes. There's a little bit of vitamin C. There's some magnesium. There's a compound in celery called 3-N-butyl phthalate, or 3-MB for short, which has got an analgesic activity. Does that mean that it's going to suddenly cure all of your ills if you drink a glass every day? Of course it doesn't. Is it going to be, if you went into a shop and there was a bottle of celery juice or a can of Coke, would that be a better option? Absolutely. Is it going to taste as nice? Probably not. That's the truth.
Okay. Actually, Inga's also asked another question here. Let's talk about different diets. Dale, what are your views? Let's see if I can get this comment on the screen. What are your views on Ayurveda-based food choices?
Ayurveda.
Ayurveda. I've said that wrong, haven't I?
Ayurveda is the... look at this. Look. Just like that. Little early Ayurvedic book that I had many years ago. I used to work at an Ayurvedic clinic actually when I was at uni. Well, the principles of Ayurveda similar to traditional Chinese medicine. They're built on 5,000-6,000 year old traditions, and they're based on observations that were trying to explain physical phenomena in the kind of social, cultural and spiritual paradigm in which they were written. So some of the terminology sounds, to us kind of wishy-washy and maybe doesn't make sense. So with Ayurveda, you've got your different doshas, like your different which are representative of certain traits, Pitta, Vata, etc. And different traits are associated with different doshas. These were just observations that were made in kind of clinical settings within that historical period, and it's been kind of carried forward. Some of that information can actually be backed up in more kind of scientific Western terminology, but it's tricky. I mean, obviously, with my background with herbal medicine, when these things have been observed for 5,000 years plus, just because there hasn't necessarily been the RCTs done on them or these kind of big studies, we can't fully discredit it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff, I mean, certainly with just putting the herbalist hat on for a minute, you look at the traditional Western herbalism from the sort of 16th century and even before that, they were using terms like the four humours, like people would be phlegmatic or melancholic or different different types of terminology, and something would be a tissue tropho-restorative or a cholagogue, and like this old school terminology, which now you actually look at it with the science hat on, it comes to the same conclusion. You're just finding different ways to actually describe the same phenomena. So I don't discount it. I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner. I really don't know the ins and the outs. I know the basics. I used to work for Dr. Mozaraf Ali years ago, down on Harley Street, so I picked up the basics, but
yeah.
I certainly don't dismiss it because 5,000 years is a lot of wisdom.
So would you say there is the perfect diet, or do you think it is based on each person's type? There's that other kind of eat right.
Yeah, one of the popular things that's around at the minute is just like, well, what works for some might not work for others, and it's all different. That's an excuse, right? That's just because it is a bloody hard science. It is a very, 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 very complex science that involves the interplay of genetic environmental interactions. Okay, nutrition essentially is the science of gene environment interactions. Yes, we do have genetic nuances, we do have variations in our physiology based on our genetics, but there's only so much variation. There's only so much. There's only so many genes within the human genome. There's only so much variation that you can get. There's only so many genotypes within this whole genetic set that makes us a human being. You know, it's what's the difference between a human being and a lettuce. Do you know what I mean? There is a completely different genetic makeup, and any variance will only be within a small set of parameters. So there are tiny nuances that would be relevant to certain people, but for most people, the same general message will ring true. Now, this is like a question that I think all of us in the nutrition world get all the time, and that is, what is this perfect diet? What should we be doing with all this contradictory information? What on earth do we do? And any of us that have really studied it to any level will say, well, we just don't know yet. We don't know what the perfect diet looks like. But what we do know is the way in which our modern diet is actually destroying our health. So we bear that in mind.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, do the opposite, then I'm sure there's a myriad of holes within it still, but we're probably hedging our bets in the right direction until we know better. So I think that can actually be broken down to 3 practices. So all of this kind of information that we have about how our modern way of eating is killing us, and doing the opposite. Doing the opposite can be broken into 3 practices: blood sugar balance, fatty acid balance, and nutrient density. Strap yourself in.
So what is... So let's... The first bit of that is, how is the modern diet killing us? Yeah. Well,
put it this way. These 3 things, blood sugar balance, fatty acid balance, and nutrient density, is like the kind of the antidote to the way in which our modern diet is killing us. The modern diet has become quite skewed in many ways. It's become skewed in terms of its macronutrient composition, and certainly in its micronutrient composition. So looking at the macronutrients first, starting from around about the late 50s and definitely really coming into public awareness around the 70s, was this focus on saturated fat and its link to cardiovascular disease. There was an American physiologist called Ansel Keys, and he had the theory that cardiovascular disease was completely and utterly caused by saturated fat intake, and that you could beautifully prove that a country's cardiovascular disease incidence would be correlated with intake of saturated fat. So he set about to prove it, created a study called the 23 country study. When it was published, it was the 7 country study. And basically it was a study of all these countries, their intake of saturated fat and their incidence of cardiovascular disease. When it's published, perfect, beautiful curve that showed the more saturated fat, the more heart disease. When the full, that was the data from 7 countries, when the full 23 countries worth of data was used and the same analytics were actually run on it, there was no correlation whatsoever. But
really?
That's a different story. I mean, we'll be here all bloody day.
Okay.
That's publication bias and all sorts of other things. But because of those findings, because of that study, there was a huge public health campaign that told us, 1, we need to drop the saturated fat and instead opt for the heart healthy vegetable oils, and also build our diet around less fattier foods and more starchy carbohydrates. And those 2 things alone probably cause more damage to public health than anything ever has. It's probably killed more people than every war that's ever broken out. This is for the simple reason that it has such a drastic effect on our macronutrient intake, which in turn has such a drastic effect on our metabolic health. So with that public health campaign, everyone took that on board. Everyone started eating their nice cereal for breakfast and just their diet around the starches, and everyone got rid of butter and lard and these kind of things, and instead they had margarine, and they had the lovely crisp and dry or flora oil to do their sauté and their frying in, and they thought they were benefiting their health. This is where things start to go wrong, and this is where we do need to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. There is no short way of doing this, but it's pretty fascinating stuff. So none of these foods are bad. I'm not into demonizing foods. For me, it's about the pattern of consumption. Okay. Mm-hmm. So with this whole notion of building our diet just around the starchy carbohydrates and having less of the animal foods, what happens when we eat food? Our blood sugar goes up. When our blood sugar goes up, the body responds by secreting a hormone, insulin. Insulin binds to an insulin receptor on our cell. It opens a little doorway called a glucose transporter. The cell is able to take in additional glucose that's in circulation, that's above the norm that should be in circulation at any one time, because blood glucose needs to be within limited parameters. If it goes too high or too low, it's life-threatening. So it's always stays at an even keel. When it rises above that kind of norm, that baseline point, we secrete insulin. Insulin tells the cells that there's more available. The cells take that up. They use that to actually make energy. They use that to create ATP, which is what cells run on. Now, this goes on perfectly happily, but the thing is, cells will actually reach a cut-off point very quickly. They will only take in so much in one sitting. They get full quite easily. When they get full, they actually stop opening the glucose transporter, and the cell won't allow any more glucose to come in. Now, if blood sugar is still high, because the cell has closed its doors, the next thing that happens is that glucose is converted into something called glycogen, which is a storage form of glucose, and that gets deposited in our skeletal muscle and in the liver. Yeah. But again, there's only so much glycogen that we can take in one sitting. Once our glycogen stores are full, if blood sugar is still high, then what happens is any excess gets sent to the liver and converted into something called triacylglycerol, otherwise known as triglycerides, which are like a fatty substance which our body can store, and we all know where it stores it. It stores it in the adipose tissue. We start to put on weight, particularly in this case around the abdomen, and this is when you start to get that abdominal weight gain that won't shift.
Yeah.
So when you look at that,
and is this, sorry, just on a side note, that I'm just thinking, because when people put on weight, people tend to put on weight in different places. I'm definitely kind of it goes to my bum kind of a person. Other people it's like a belly kind of fat thing. Is there any kind of bearing?
This often hormones generally.
Right.
When you get that abdominal weight gain, it's this whole insulin model. See what happens there. I mean, already you can start to see two potential things that can happen. If blood sugar is consistently high, then we can put on weight if there's an excess, because there'll be that excess stored. Mm-hmm. We'll also that triacylglycerol, that storage form that goes to adipose tissue, that is transported to adipose tissue via the cardiovascular system. So blood fats start to go up. These fats can oxidize, cause damage within the cardiovascular system, and set the scene for cardiovascular disease. And also you get cholesterol going up, etc. So two things already: obesity, cardiovascular disease.
And is that what kind of leads to kind of things like strokes as well? And it's a whole cascade of different things. So blood lipids, inflammatory load, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I can get on some of the mechanisms.
So just to kind of keep it.
I need to keep it in context. I can't leave that, otherwise people won't know what the picture is, right?
So are you saying that's kind of sugar?
Yeah, I'll get to that. Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. Carry on. Keep going.
I'm not one of these half a picture kind of people. So if this keeps on going, if blood sugar is continually pushed up and up and up, then after a while, the insulin receptors on our cells will actually stop listening to insulin, and we become insulin resistant, and then all of those things start to happen more aggressively, but also we start to move into the zone of type 2 diabetes. Now, what causes us to be in this state in the first place? What causes blood sugar to go up and up and up in an uncontrolled manner? Well, let's look at this. When people were told to change their diet in that way, this became the norm. People might have a bowl of cereal and a slice of toast for breakfast. They might have a sandwich and a packet of crisps for lunch. In the evening, they might have a bowl of pasta or some mashed potatoes, or bread to mop up the sauce, like if you're old school English, whatever. None of these foods are bad. I'm not demonising the food. The pattern of consumption is the problem. That amount of starchy food across the day is pushing blood sugar levels up beyond that our cells can deal with effectively, and you start to get this metabolic breakdown. So that's the first thing. That bit of public health advice to build your diet around the starchy foods led to quite dysfunctional consumption of starchy foods, particularly the refined ones. I mean, because most of the time it isn't multigrain bread. Most of the time it isn't brown rice. Most of the time it isn't sweet potato. A lot of it is the more junk carbohydrates in our convenience culture.
The white bread.
Exactly. White bread, white rice, white pasta. Now, the other thing, dropping the saturated fats. By dropping the saturated fats, we were eating more of these plant-based oils, like the margarine and the sunflower oil. These are almost entirely composed of a fatty acid called omega-6. You've heard of omega-3 and omega-6. They're both essential fatty acids. Omega-6 we only need in very, very tiny amounts for the health of the nervous system and for certain hormonal control signalling structures. But any excess omega-6 that this one I'll shorten a little bit because then it will really go nuts if we kind of go too in depth with this one. Too much omega-6, more than that tiny amount that's needed. That tiny amount that's needed, the pathway that actually metabolizes it and turns it into these beneficial end products is very easily saturated for the day. It doesn't take long for those needs to be met each day. Once those needs are met, any excess omega-6 that comes in gets turned into something that actually exacerbates and triggers chronic inflammation, something called a series 2 prostaglandin. Now,
so the fact that I've always avoided marge and all these spreads and only gone for butter is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Now, this doesn't mean that we eat saturated fat with abandon either, because I mean that's got its own set of issues. But we just get things back to our natural way of eating again. Like this processed crap, we need to get rid of. Anyway, if we kind of rein that in, if we kind of flip those two things on their head and start doing the opposite to those, so we really start to cut back on the amount of refined carbohydrates. For me, I'll have brown rice, I'll have multigrain bread, and I'll have whole wheat pastas. But I will shrink the portion sizes right down and bulk my meals out with protein and non-starchy vegetables. When you do that, you're taking in loads of fibre. By combining high fibre carbohydrates and protein, you're actually creating something that takes much longer to be digested, which drip feeds your blood sugar. So you don't get that blood sugar flood, which means you don't get the raised cholesterol and triglycerides, which means you don't get that excess glucose in circulation that starts to go around your waist as a spare tyre. Your blood pressure doesn't go up. You don't increase your risk of type 2 diabetes. Now, you look at the things that are actually burdening our healthcare system, okay? It's not weird infectious diseases, green parrots disease, dengue fever. It's nothing like that. It is type 2 diabetes. It's obesity. It's cardiovascular disease. And it's lots of often avoidable cancers.
And you said there's a lot of inflammatory disease as well.
Most of these have inflammation in their kind of etiology as an important part. But this shift in the way that we eat is what has caused this epidemic that we're facing, and it's all to do with this metabolic dysfunction. You start to take that burden off of these basic metabolic functions, and your outlook starts to change. So that's the first thing, reining in the refined carbohydrate intake and making sure you're going for the real high fibre, slow burning options. The next thing is the kind of fats that you're taking in. So get rid of the vegetable oil, get rid of the margarines, use a little bit of butter. For 99% of your cooking, you can use olive oil. For really, really high temperature stuff, a little bit of coconut oil, and that's it. Then you won't be getting that omega-6 excess, and then eat more oily fish, so you're getting more omega-3, which is highly anti-inflammatory. And then the final thing of those three was micronutrient density, and that is the fact that we are in this ping and ding generation. We're in the convenience generation where so many of us are living on processed foods. There are massive demands on our physiology from the sheer amount of stress and mayhem that is modern life, and our micronutrients, i.e. vitamins, minerals, trace elements, phytochemicals, our need for those aren't being met because we're not having enough of these whole foods. Just getting back to whole foods, having some fresh plant foods with every meal will give you more micronutrient density. These micronutrients, these are biochemical facilitators. So in the body, they either make something happen or they make something that makes something happen. And if you don't get enough of those, then you're in trouble.
It's pretty simple, really. Eat as nature intended.
In practice, cut down on the refined carbohydrates and move over to the whole grain varieties and the slow burners. get rid of the bad types of fats, eat more fresh, minimally processed food, and that is as complicated as it ever needs be for most of the population. Now, the actual physiological impact that has, as you can see already, and that was the most ridiculously watered down version we could do, is very, very complex. But you don't have to concern yourself with the complexities of it. I just feel it's my job to give you the picture. But in practice, it just means going back to basics. Just get back to whole foods.
So Michelle has said here, where's the comment gone, that she's the happiest and healthiest since going on a paleo diet. So let's talk about paleo for a minute. That's kind of quite trendy.
Yeah, I mean, that tends to be very low carb. That ticks all the boxes that was just spoke about, basically.
Okay.
But then again, so does a plant-based diet. So does, there's a lot of them will tick a lot of those boxes. It's cutting out refined carbohydrates. You're not going to be sitting there munching on white bread and sugar on a paleo diet. You're going to be, at most, your carbohydrates are going to be coming from like sweet potatoes and squash. There's not going to be a huge amount of starch. Any starch that comes in are going to be super high fiber, starchy plants.
Okay, and what about the ketogenic diet? A lot of people are talking about that as well.
It's where 70% of your entire caloric intake comes from fat, and that basically shifts your body from using glucose as a fuel source, and instead using a derivative of fat oxidation called a ketone body as fuel instead. It's a very, very, very difficult thing to actually get right. It takes a huge amount of discipline to stay in ketosis. Now, it's nothing new. It's been used in outpatient management of childhood epilepsy for decades. But it does take a lot of, you have to know what you're doing, you have to do it right, and you have to adhere to the letter. You can't deviate at all, otherwise you'll just go straight back into using glucose, and it will take you a long time to get that adaptation back. Yes, there are certainly some metabolic benefits that have been observed. There's a few things that concern me personally. Now, this isn't based on data. This isn't based on any kind of study that's been done. This is just me putting two and two together and asking a question. I wonder whether there's too much, because of the amount of animal fats that are in there. I mean, I'm no vegetarian. I eat everything, absolutely everything. But the amount of animal fats that are in there might be a very high intake of something called arachidonic acid. Now, earlier I spoke about omega-6 and too much omega-6 becoming this pro-inflammatory compound. When omega-6 goes down that metabolic pathway that actually creates that pro-inflammatory compound, one of the intermediary substances that's formed during that transformation is something called arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid then goes over to form a series 2 prostaglandin, which switches on and exacerbates inflammation. Arachidonic acid exists preformed in animal fats. Again, it's an important nutrient. A certain proportion of our brain is composed of arachidonic acid. It's not like it's universally toxic, but it's the level that, the dose is in it. The poison is in the dose, as they say, Or the difference between medicine and poison is dose. Same deal here. So I do wonder whether there's a little too much arachidonic acid intake over the long term. I do also, especially with keto, less of an issue with paleo because you're eating so many vegetables, but with keto and this new obsession with the carnivore diet. I mean, there was someone on the carnivore diet at that event that we were at. And that was interesting, when someone gets in your face with no nutrition qualifications and tells you what you're talking bollocks. But there we go, it's a different conversation. People that are kind of just consuming meat. I worry about the impact on the microbiome. Could it be positive? Could it be negative? We have no idea. And if there's any negative impacts on the microbiome, that can shut down your immune system. That can have serious kind of gene expression issues further down the chain. So there's a lot of questions around it, and this is my real take home for all of this. You look at all of these diets, all of the diets that are out there. Every single one of them has these dramatic transformations in our health associated with them. You see people that have adhered to them, and they felt wonderful, and they've had these health transformations. But then every single one of these diets are diametrically opposed to one another. They're drastically different from each other. So what gives? How can that possibly be? There's one factor that unifies every single one of them, and it's the thing that's always ignored. It's because they all leave out the crap that makes us sick in the first place. And it's all
Yeah.
this stuff we were talking about. They're leaving out refined carbohydrates. They're leaving out highly processed vegetable oils. They all focus on getting some more fresh whole foods in. None of them say live on McDonald's every day or live on fish finger sandwiches every day. None of them say that. They're all built around whole foods in one way or another. So that simple action of just cutting out the crap that's making us sick and eating more whole foods, ta-da, it's the magic bullet. But it's, it's not sexy because you can't call it the XYZ diet and have like some kind of exclusivity on it. But in truth, that's all it is.
So Michelle's asked a question which actually is something quite close to my heart at the moment. Michelle's asked about, I'll put the question up here, is eating for brain health and body health at odds at times? Because, my dad's got dementia, and for me, that's a big kind of motivator to do everything in my power to keep my brain function tip top. Yes, I want to have a healthy body and I want to live a long time, but there's no point being kind of physically well and active if your brain's deteriorated. So would you say that we can do both?
So you're saying your brain isn't a physiological system then?
Well,
it's an interesting one. No, and I said that like that deliberately because that is one of the strange things with most physiological systems. The influence on its health is is either down to biochemistry or trauma.
Yeah. Those
are the two things that can potentially negatively influence health. So when you're talking the cardiovascular system, if someone's diet and lifestyle, it's just like beer, pizza and fags, that's the biochemical assault on the cardiovascular system. If someone gets zapped with 150,000 volts, that's a traumatic influence on the cardiovascular system, both of which will negatively affect it. That applies to every other physiological system apart from the brain and the nervous system. Well, the nervous system, the PNS, the peripheral nervous system, that's very much still biochemical, but the central nervous system, where cognition takes place, where all of these kind of things, this is where you've got this weird and wonderful interplay between biochemistry and experience. Okay, you've got experiential influences on mental health, and you've got biochemical influences on mental health. Both can work both can affect each other synergistically, and both can affect each other in opposing ways as well. So they can be connected, they can be completely separated. Now, obviously, if you've gone through any kind of emotional trauma, that can affect the biochemistry of your brain. But then by altering the diet, you can affect the biochemistry of the brain as well in a way that won't take away the emotional trauma, but can maybe help you process it in a different way, can maybe help you recover from it in a different way. I mean, so it is one that is kind of fraught with complexity for those reasons. And I can only really talk about this on a biochemical level because I'm not a psychologist. I've not got a psychology degree, and it's not really my place to talk about the experiential. But certainly from the biochemical point of view, in terms of things like anxiety and depression, you can have weirdly. I'm sorry to do this, but weirdly.
I was going to talk to you about the books in a minute. Let's start talking about the books. With
anxiety and depression. So with anxiety, you can influence the amount of GABA that is expressed by the central nervous system. GABA is the inhibitory neurotransmitter, which can help to downregulate things and help you feel calmer and more centered. With depression, you can influence serotonin production. You can influence the uptake of serotonin by enhanced omega-3 intake. You were talking about dementia. There's been a lot of research around DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, DHA intake, and the reduction in plaque formation and the little islands of plaques that can exist in the brain. Also, going back to keto diets, some people that have been in the full throes of dementia, and some people are calling Alzheimer's. Because obviously there's lots of types of dementia. There's vascular, there's things. But
my dad's got vascular.
Yeah. So improving cardiovascular health and improving cerebral blood flow and things like that can have an influence there, obviously. But with things like Alzheimer's, where you've actually got these plaques, these areas of damaged neurological tissue, those neurons within those little plaque islands are less able to use glucose as a fuel source. So those cells just aren't working. The hamster on the wheel is knackered, basically. Like these little battery packs within the cells just aren't working properly because they can't process the sugar. But ketone bodies brings those cells back to life. We found that in a lot of trials now, people that have got full-blown Alzheimer's have responded very, very well to a ketogenic diet, a true strict ketogenic diet where the body is actually running on these ketone bodies. Because those cells are not reliant on glucose anymore, they've got a new fuel source that's available to them, and they can start to function just like they did before they became
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's really, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be doing a documentary about this in sometime next year with a friend of mine, Tanya Franks, who's actually in EastEnders. She's reigning in EastEnders. She's been doing a lot of work with Alzheimer's awareness and stuff like that, and we're trying to...
Fantastic. I think it's so needed. It's so needed. It's not...
To keep people, because it's not... That side of things isn't talked about. We always see these programs that are like very heartstring led, and I don't say this in any kind of mean way at all. These programs that are very good at pulling the heartstrings and making people feel sorry for it, and having the awareness from the point of view of like, oh, isn't it awful? But there's none of them that have actually said, look, this is potentially things that we could do for ourselves. This is potentially where there could be a link. This is something that you or your loved ones could actually potentially do today that may make a difference, that may actually help you reduce your risk of these kinds of things. So hopefully we can get some of that kind of information in there.
That would be amazing, and I think it's so needed. It's not a particularly, getting older is not a particularly sexy topic to talk about, but the thing is, we are living longer, but I think for a lot of us, it's living longer, but not with the best quality of life. And I think, we need both to have... I'd love to be running a marathon when I'm 80 years of age.
It's got to start now.
Why not? Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about kind of different types of diets, but we're just touching there upon diets for certain kind of conditions and ailments. And you've got several books, haven't you? So you mentioned the depression, anxiety one. Come on. I'm happy to shamelessly plug your books because I think people need this stuff. People know I'm an avid book reader, and it's the cheapest source of information to transform your life. So Dale has written 15 books. He's got 2 coming up. And some are kind of bit more mainstreamy, kind of very general, but some are very specific. Yeah,
so they really do range from the kind of basic A to Z how to cook healthily, which is what the book's called, How to Cook Healthily, through to these smaller ones, explorations of specific subjects. So there's one on diabetes, one on cardiovascular disease, one on digestion, one on anxiety and depression. I've done, probably one of the ones I'm most proud of is The Power of Three, and that's about those 3 things: the blood sugar balance, fatty acid balance, and nutrient density, because it's been a really good opportunity for me to put that science across and put that kind of theory and that argument across.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a little bit of everything out there. And also I've done a couple of books to go with the Eat Shop Save series that we did as well. So yeah, there's quite a lot to keep you informed. But the thing is, all of them follow the same format. Really, the format is give you the science. I don't hold back on detail, as you probably realised in this session. My pet hate is when people water down information, like why assume the world's stupid. But I put it across in a way that everyone can get the key points from. So the first half will be all the science, there'll be the anatomy and the physiology. Look, I'll just show you a bit of an example, like using the anxiety and depression one. These kind of illustrations aren't in all of them, but there's like the information in there, the science, the anatomy and the physiology. But then that's only of so much use. The whole premise behind what I do is putting all of this information into a practical context, into a practical framework. Once you've got that information, like I could stand there doing a PowerPoint presentation and saying, do more of this, less of that. This study has found this study has found that. And you might get a couple of little snippets, but 3 days later you'll be like, well, what do I do with it? What does that actually mean?
So you give us the information. I was going to say, then you give us the delicious recipes.
Is then turned into the practice. So it's like, okay, that's the theory. This is how to put it into practice every day.
Yeah, I love it.
That's the basic premise behind everything that I do.
Yeah, Liz has said, thank goodness, I hate books without science.
Yeah.
Liz is also...
Don't worry
Liz has
about
also asked another question. Asthma, I'm guessing, is there a good kind of foods to avoid or to...
is anyone's guess. Asthma is a type 2 hypersensitivity reaction. It's exactly the same reaction as hay fever and eczema, exactly the same thing, just occurring in a different tissue. It's where the immune system has an overly exaggerated response to certain things. The most well-known stimuli, obviously, is dust mites in asthma. That's like a really, really big one. But then there are other potential environmental factors that can exacerbate it, that can make the inflammatory load worse. That can sometimes be trial and error to pinpoint. I often recommend people keep a symptom diary. So literally, as the name suggests, keep a diary of your symptoms, and every day match what you ate, where you went, that kind of stuff. And if you
that makes sense.
In time, you may be able to see the aggravating factors. But flipping that on its head, what can you do to actually ease it? Increase intake of omega-3 fatty acids from oily fish or from a supplement. Omega-3 helps your body to actually manufacture its own inbuilt anti-inflammatories. So it doesn't take that immunological response away. That is the immune system reacting to that thing forever now, unfortunately. What it's doing is reducing the severity of what happens when the immune system is sensitized. So that kind of constriction, that bronchoconstriction that is caused by what's it called? Histamine. See, this is what happens when you get old. 42, crikey. Histamine, it's caused by histamine, and you've got inflammation and you've got constriction there. It can ease that a little bit. Also, that there's some foods like apples have got like a particular anti-inflammatory enzyme in them that some people have reported have been beneficial, but that's not come from a randomised trial. That's just just stuff that's been reported. But omega-3 can be very, very helpful. And then the symptom diary.
Brilliant. So just see if there's any other quick questions. Michelle said here, the power of 3. I'm getting it. There we go. We've got one sale from this broadcast at least.
Hey.
So I think, Christmas is approaching. There's people in our lives who, may not be experiencing the best of health right now. I think this may be a great stocking filler, great, gift ideas. The gift, people to buy me books all day long. Well, the books that I want to read. I'm so, yeah. I think books are life-changing, and what a better place to start than transforming your health. We're moving into this new decade. I think your health goal should be number one for everybody, wherever you are on the health scale. There is something you can do to improve it. I know I certainly can.
And looking at the kind of work that you do, and obviously the people that are following you are people with huge aspirations and people that are wanting to go out there and kick ass every single day. If you're dragging yourself through the day, if you've barely got enough energy, if you're constantly getting run down and burnt out, you're not going to perform on that level. So even if you look at it from any angle, there's benefits to getting healthier. Whether you look at just the aesthetics, whether you look at just the fact that it reduces your risk of certain disease, whether you look at it from the point of view of it will help you go out there and smash the daylights out of it every single day, where I have the problem, I can't, I just go and 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 fall over because I have so much energy every single day. I always feel animated, I feel clear-headed, I feel great, and that is through good food. Good food and consistent exercise, and it can absolutely transform the way you perform on every single level. You can take on more. You can execute at a higher level. You can
100%.
You can conceive ideas and solutions and endpoints in a way that you never will. It's mind blowing how much of a difference it can make.
Yeah, Liz has also said here, I'm buying the lot.
Hey. Thank you, Liz. What you like?
Sorry, one other question.
Later. Yeah.
Sorry, so T has asked you the question. Hi T, thanks for watching. Dale's thoughts on the documentary The Game Changers. I've heard a lot about this. I've not seen it yet. Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, I've seen it several times. It's... Oh yeah, so I was just checking that I shared you properly. I did share you properly. Good. There's a few nuggets of good information in there. There is some good information in there, but it is one-sided. It is cherry-picked. I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer that the more...
For those who haven't seen it, this is about the whole vegan thing.
Plant-based diet, yeah, but it's about whole food plant-based diet rather than, because vegan just tells you what you cut out. But you can eat Oreos and Booja ice cream and be vegan. But this is about whole food.
Is that bad? I'm joking.
And basically, it's a no-brainer. If you eat more minimally processed plant foods, it's going to benefit your health. Does going vegan automatically give you this health utopia that some promise? No. How do I know that? I was vegan for 21 years.
Wow, really?
21 years, okay? And after that time, because there was things I didn't know at the time, my health did start to suffer. There are gaps in the vegan diet, and they're not often talked about. You can absolutely make up those gaps with supplements. Things like the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, things like B12, etc. Vitamin D can be problematic as well for two reasons. Firstly, there's not many of the food intakes because people aren't eating oily fish or butter or things like that. But also, the primary source of vitamin D for humans is the conversion of cholesterol into vitamin D when we're exposed to ultraviolet radiation. A vegan diet can make cholesterol really quite very low, and there isn't enough to go around, so to speak. So vitamin D can sometimes be a problem. You can make up the deficit with the supplement. It's easy. If you really want to stick to it, if you want to go vegan for environmental reasons, for animal welfare reasons, there's no discussion. It's absolutely, of course, the only way to go. Of course, animal welfare is an important part of it. That still plays on my mind daily. There isn't a day goes by when I'm not conscious of that. The environmental impact, all of those kind of things. So if it's purely ethically, then do it. Realise there's going to be holes in it that you'll need to make up with supplements.
So when you changed from being a vegan to not being a vegan, what differences did you notice in your health? Because I'm pescatarian. I think I said to you, if it wasn't for sushi and chocolate, I could probably be vegan. And cheese is the other thing. I do like my cheese. But what would you say? How did your health change or improve when you stopped eating a vegan diet?
Got lean again. My energy levels were consistent. My brain function really was affected. I didn't realise it at the time. It's like it awakened something. That's all I can say. Like awakened something within, and it had a massive effect on cognitive function, both
interesting
cognitive ability and also moods, also perceptions. It was very very bizarre, very bizarre.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I became vegan purely for the animal side of things, which is why I still struggle with it, because it affected my health so negatively that I can't really go back to it. I've tried going back to it and just nosedive very quickly, but I've always been conscious of the animal thing because I was a practicing Buddhist for a long time. I used to follow a lay Buddhist order and took the Dharma very seriously and took those kind of practices very seriously. So it was an important part of my spiritual evolution as well. But it got to the point where it's just affecting my health so negatively that something had to give.
No, I get that. So this has been fabulous, and honestly I could speak to you all day, but I'm mindful of your time and the audience's time. I just want to kind of just wrap up with a couple of questions. So firstly, you can go and find Dale on Instagram. He's got a great page, his website, I think it's the medicinalchef.com, and also his books on Amazon. Is it best to buy books off your website or Amazon? Does it not really matter?
From my website, it just links out to Amazon anyway.
Okay.
I just haven't got the instructions to send them out, unfortunately.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to end with a couple of questions. Right, Dale, if you could go back and talk to your 14-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Well, there's two things. One's a little bit sort of tongue-in-cheek, and that is buy Bitcoin in 2009. The other one would be everything generally turns out okay. There's always a way to figure something out. It doesn't matter how much the shit hits the fan. You can always find a way to get out of these things, and don't let very very small bumps in the road disable you for such a long time.
Yeah, because we had a long chat about spirituality and the law of attraction, and even though you're a very science-based man, you've talked about Buddhism recently. That whole kind of big vision thing. You resonate with that, don't you?
Massively. It's a huge part. It's something that I don't get to talk about a great deal, but it's just lately that I've been doing a few interviews, and obviously there's been great interviewers like you that are pulling those things out of me, that are kind of teasing those little things out. And it's great to talk about it, because I actually, I guess people didn't realise that there was necessarily that side to me, and I guess it's.
I think that's what this show's all about. We see the surface stuff, but it's interesting to see the behind the scenes, what made the person, and because I'm
huge part of my life.
Yeah. So have you made a vision board?
I've made loads. And one of the weird things is everything bar one on the last vision board that I made, I have. Okay,
I need to know what the bar one is.
Bar one is the house, but it's the some of it was quite superficial. I mean, there was like a certain amount of income, there was like the type of the car, there was everything. The car is brand spanking new, sat on my drive, and it's not on credit. It's bought outright from this visualization. It's all because I'm not too fixated on the whole law of attraction thing in and of itself. I just think it's an important part to get you in the right mind state, to gravitate towards the things that you really, really want.
I think you've already said it with the spirituality, and it's not just about, and I say this time and time again, you can't just make a vision board and sit there and it just comes. You do the work, you take the action, but you've got the spiritual awareness. I think everything, it all slots into place, and spirituality and being a good human being is a big part of it.
The one thing that I really am a massive believer in is synchronicity. Because there's been too much weird stuff that's happened in my life to dismiss it. I mean, the synchronicities that happen and the manifestation that happens in my life now is frightening. It's literally the point. I'll have an idea and I'll say something, and it's there. It starts to show up pretty quickly now, which is bonkers. And I think you get into a certain flow state, don't you?
Definitely. It's like any skill you want to master. It takes time. You fall off the wagon, then you pick up. And I think it's just focusing. It's a mastery. You just got to keep. As long as you've kind of got your big vision and you've got your kind of mindset right, and that hiccups are just bumps in the road, and
it's your mission.
They're going to come. But it's how you deal with them.
Is it tuition?
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question. So, it's your last day on Earth. What's your final meal?
Probably be sushi prepared by that guy who has the sushi place in Tokyo Station. The one that documentary was about. I can't remember his name. Washed down with something like a really beautiful like Santa Mignon.
That sounds heavenly. I'll join you in that. I was about to say, and would you prepare it? But you've just answered that question already.
No. Prepared by that sushi master. I mean, I've seen the queues for this place. I've never eaten there. I've walked past it several times in Tokyo Station, and people just queuing
Fabulous.
To get this food, and it's just
Yeah. So T's just said, no, it's not the medical chef, the medicinal chef.
Yeah.
And I've loved this conversation. It's so good, and I'm so happy that I don't have to start drinking celery juice. So for that, I thank you.
A nice cup of coffee, some green tea, or some water. That's it.
That sounds perfect. That sounds brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And it's been a great episode. And and just a quick add-on that, we touched upon vision boards there. I am doing Global Vision Board Day on the 27th of December. I'll pop a link a little bit later, but it's melaniemore.co.uk/2020 vision. God, I nearly forgot my own URL there. And so if,
Vision, that's a wicked name.
So if you have got a vision for your health, which should be at the top, firstly, go and buy Dale's books. book on the vision board on the vision board workshop, and make health your priority, because that is a foundation on which everything else is going to be built upon. So thank you so much, Dale. It's been wonderful, and I'll see you next week on Big Vision TV. Right, let's